If you are an H-1B worker or your family depends on H-1B or H-4, you have probably seen the headline. Trump shut the door on Indians, H-1B visa stamping frozen until 2027, thousands stranded. Many people are reporting that new visa interview slots at U.S. consulates in India are hard to find. Some consulate pages show wait time information as not available, and some applicants say their interviews were pushed far into the future. That combination can absolutely disrupt travel, jobs, and families. But the second urgent part is this. A scary headline can jump straight to the conclusion of a ban or an official freeze when the real issue may be appointment capacity, scheduling behavior, or shifting prioritization. By the end of this video, you will know 3 things clearly. First, what visa stamping actually is and why it is separate from an H-1B approval. Second, who is most at risk of getting stuck and who is likely not affected right now. And third, a practical do this, avoid this plan to protect your job, your travel, and your documents while you track new openings safely. Now, before we go further, we need to separate what is being widely reported from what is confirmed. A lot of the viral posts use absolute language like frozen, shut down, or until 2027. Unless you have an official announcement in front of you from the U.S. State Department or a published policy change, treat those words as unverified framing. What we can say without overreaching is this. People are reporting that appointment availability for petition-based visas, including H-1B, looks unusually limited at multiple posts in India, and some see very long projected timelines when they do see a date. We can also say that the State Department publishes visa interview wait times, and sometimes those tools show not available instead of a number, which can happen for different operational reasons. Here is the part most people miss. Not available does not automatically mean stopped. It can mean the post is not publishing a reliable estimate. It can mean they are releasing appointments in batches, or it can mean the category is being handled differently right now. So if your takeaway has been, stamping is banned, you need to pause. The right takeaway is, appointment access appears constrained, and you must plan as if you may not get a convenient slot quickly. Next, let us define the basics in plain English, because confusion here causes the biggest mistakes. USCIS is the agency that approves H-1B petitions. That is your I-129 approval, and you get an approval notice called an I-797. The State Department runs U.S. embassies and consulates abroad and issues visas and passports. Visa stamping is what lets you enter the United States at a port of entry in H-1B status after traveling abroad. These are connected but not the same. An H-1B approval does not automatically guarantee you can get a stamping appointment quickly. And a stamping appointment delay does not necessarily mean your H-1B petition is in trouble. This is where people get denied in real life. They assume an approval equals travel flexibility. It does not. Now let us talk about the specific claim of freezing until 2027. Could someone see an appointment in 2027 on a scheduling portal? Yes, it is possible for an appointment system to show a far-out date when near-term slots are gone. Could an interview be rescheduled by the system or by the applicant and land in a very late month? Also possible. Does that prove a rule that says no stamping until 2027? No. It proves only that the appointment supply versus demand is badly mismatched, at least at that moment. So our job is to treat this like a practical crisis, not a political slogan. Now, let us get very clear on who is affected and who is not. Group 1, highest risk. H-1B workers and H-4 dependents who are physically in India and need a visa stamp to return to the United States. If your current visa stamp is expired and you traveled, you cannot board a flight back in H status without a valid visa in your passport. That is where people become stranded. Group 2. H-1B workers in the United States with valid status but planning travel to India for a wedding, family emergency, or vacation, and who will need stamping while abroad. Your risk is not your petition, your risk is timing. If you cannot get an appointment within your time off, you may be stuck outside longer than planned. Group 3. Newly approved H-1B workers abroad who need their first stamp to enter the U.S. for the job start. If appointments are scarce, your start date, onboarding, and relocation can all be delayed. Group 4. Employers in the U.S. who rely on these workers. Even if the worker is brilliant and fully approved, they are not productive in the U.S. if they cannot get the visa stamp and enter. Now, who might not be affected in the same way? If you are currently in the U.S. in H-1B status and you are not traveling, a stamping backlog does not stop you from continuing to work, as long as you maintain status and follow your employer and immigration counsel guidance. Many people confuse visa stamp with status. Status is what you have inside the U.S. Visa stamp is what you need to enter. Another group that may be less affected: people who can use an interview waiver process, sometimes called dropbox, depending on eligibility rules that can change and vary by category and time. I am not saying everyone qualifies, and I am not giving you legal advice. I am saying there are pathways where an in-person interview is not required for some applicants, and that can change the timeline. Another group: people who can schedule at a U.S. consulate in a third country. That can be an option for some, but it comes with risks, extra travel costs, and sometimes the post may prioritize residents of that country. So it is not a magic solution. Here is a quick myth versus reality moment. Myth: if the consulate has no appointments, USCIS must have suspended H-1B approvals. Reality: USCIS approvals and consular appointment calendars are different systems run by different entities. Myth: if you see a 2027 date, it means there is an official freeze until 2027. Reality: it may only reflect the next open slot they are showing you at that time, and additional slots can appear later in batches. Myth: if you are in the U.S. and your stamp is expired, you are illegal. Reality: you can be in valid status in the U.S. even with an expired visa stamp, as long as you maintain your status. The stamp matters for re-entry, not for staying while in status. Now, why does this happen? Why do slots vanish and dates jump? There are a few mechanics that create this kind of shock overnight. 1. Capacity. Consulates have finite interview windows, staffing, and security constraints. If they reduce capacity even temporarily, the backlog becomes visible immediately. 2. Demand surges. Certain times of the year are heavy travel seasons, and certain cycles like student and exchange visitor seasons can put pressure on the same consular resources, even though the categories are different. 3. Rescheduling behavior. When people constantly check and reschedule, the system can look like there is nothing. Then suddenly something appears for minutes, then it disappears. That does not mean corruption or a ban. It means demand is swallowing supply. 4. Prioritization choices. Hosts may prioritize certain appointment types at different times. That is an operational reality. 5. Security and administrative processing. Some cases take longer, not because of the appointment, but because of post-interview processing. That can clog the pipeline and reduce the number of new cases that can be handled quickly. Here is another part most people miss. Even when you do get an appointment, the total time away from the U.S. is not just interview day. It includes biometrics, the interview, possible administrative processing, and passport return logistics. If you plan travel assuming a 3-day turnaround, you are planning to fail. Now, real-world consequences. Let us walk through a few. First, travel risk. If you depart the U.S. without a valid H-1B visa stamp, you are betting that you can get a new stamp and get your passport back on time. If appointment access is tight, that bet becomes dangerous. Second, employment disruption. Many employers will support remote work temporarily, but not all roles can be done abroad, and there are tax and compliance issues. Even if your manager is supportive, HR and legal may not be able to keep you abroad for months. Third, family stress. H-4 spouses and children may be traveling too. A long delay can mean kids missing school, spouses missing jobs, and families being separated if one person returns and another cannot. Fourth, document timing. Your I-797 validity dates, your employment start dates, and any dependent documentation can be time-sensitive. Fifth, money. Last-minute changes can be expensive. flight changes, hotel costs, extended rentals, and lost income. Now, 2 example scenarios so you can see how this plays out. Example Scenario 1. Ravi works for a U.S. tech company in California. His H-1B extension was approved and his visa stamp is expired. He plans a 2-week trip to India for a family wedding and assumes he will easily get a stamping appointment in that window. He books flights and takes PTO. After landing in India, he sees no regular appointments for weeks, and the earliest date he can lock is months away. And then the system shows an even later date after rescheduling. Even if he finds a slot, he is not guaranteed same-week passport return, and if his case hits administrative processing, the timeline can stretch further. The result is not just inconvenience. His employer may need him back physically, and that is how someone becomes stranded. Example Scenario 2. Priya is outside the U.S. with a new H-1B approval and a start date in the U.S. She needs her first stamp to enter and begin work. If the next appointment she can secure is far out, her start date gets pushed, and her employer may reconsider the role. The petition approval is not the problem. The ability to get the visa stamp and physically enter is. So what should you do now? I am going to give you a practical checklist that is safe, non-speculative, and focused on reducing risk. Do this. First, confirm what you actually need. If you are in the U.S. and not traveling, you may not need stamping right now. Do not create a crisis by confusing stamp with status. Second, if you must travel, coordinate early with your employer or immigration team. Ask them what documentation they expect you to carry and what their policy is if you get delayed abroad. Third, gather a clean document packet before you leave. A valid passport, your I-797 approval notice, recent pay stubs if applicable, an employment verification letter, and any prior immigration documents relevant to your case. The goal is to avoid scrambling from overseas. Fourth, monitor appointment availability only through official scheduling portals and official consulate pages. Scams and paid slot services can put your account at risk and can lead to cancellations. Fifth, build time buffers. If your trip is optional and you cannot tolerate a multi-week delay, consider postponing. If your trip is urgent, plan for a longer stay, financially and logistically, before you depart. Sixth, if you already have an appointment, avoid unnecessary reschedules. People sometimes chase an earlier date and accidentally lose a decent one. If you have a workable date, treat it like gold. Seventh, consider whether an emergency appointment could be appropriate, but do not assume you qualify. Each post has its own criteria and documentation expectations, and misuse can backfire. Work with your employer and qualified counsel on whether an expedited request is appropriate for your situation. Now avoid this. Avoid booking non-refundable international travel if you do not already have a clear stamping plan and time buffer. Avoid relying on social media screenshots as proof of official policy. Avoid paying third parties who claim they can guarantee a slot. Avoid submitting inconsistent information across your DS-160, your petition documents, and your employment letters. Inconsistency creates delays. Avoid quitting your U.S. job or making irreversible moves based on panic headlines. Here is another myth versus reality moment. Myth: if the wait time tool says not available, it means the consulate is closed for that visa type. Reality: it can mean they are not publishing an estimate, or the category is being scheduled differently. Myth: everyone is being pushed to 2027. Reality: some people may see far-out dates, some may find earlier slots later, and outcomes vary by post, category, and timing. Myth: this targets one nationality by policy. Reality: scheduling constraints can hit certain countries harder because of demand concentration, even without a nationality-based rule. If there is a real policy change, it would typically show up in official guidance, not only as disappearing calendar slots. Next, how do you track this safely without losing your mind? Set a routine. Check the official appointment system at consistent times, not every 5 minutes. Appointment batches can appear unpredictably, but obsessive refreshing increases stress and can lead to mistakes. Follow official pages of the U.S. Embassy and consulates in India for updates. and the U.S. State Department for general visa policy updates. If you are seeing "not available" on wait times, also check later because those tools can update. Track your case status after interview using official status tools if applicable, and keep copies of confirmation pages and receipts. If you are an employer watching this, here is a simple "if you are in this group, do this" segment. If you employ H-1B workers who may travel, tell them clearly, do not travel without informing HR and Immigration Counsel, confirm re-entry documentation, and plan for potential delays. Build contingency plans for remote work, project coverage, and start dates for new hires abroad. That proactive communication can prevent a crisis. If you are an H-1B worker planning travel, here is your version. If your stamp is expired and your travel is optional, postpone until you can see a realistic appointment plan. If the travel is not optional, do not travel with a 2-week buffer and hope for the best. Plan the trip as if it could become a longer stay, and make sure your employer is aligned before you board the plane. Now, what could happen next? There are a few watch points. 1. Consulates can add capacity or release additional batches of appointments. This can happen without fanfare. 2. Interview waiver policies and eligibility criteria can be adjusted over time, which can shift demand away from in-person interviews, but those changes are not guaranteed. 3. Seasonal demand can ease, making it look like the crisis is over, then surge again. 4. Public communications. If the State Department or a specific post issues an operational update, that will be a key signal. 5. Secondary impacts. When people perceive a shortage, more people rush to book, which can make the shortage look worse. That feedback loop is real. And finally, if you see claims about political orders or a specific administration action, treat that as a separate question from appointment availability. A scheduling crunch can exist even with no new law. If there is an actual rule change, it should be verifiable in official statements or published guidance. Until then, the responsible framing is reported delays and constrained availability, with some individuals seeing far-out appointments. Let us land this with a calm recap. 1. Visa stamping is run by the State Department, and it is separate from USCIS approving your H-1B petition. 2. Limited appointment availability can strand travelers, but it does not automatically mean an official freeze or a ban. 3. The highest risk group is anyone outside the U.S. who needs a visa stamp to return, and anyone considering travel without a valid stamp. 4. Your best protection is planning. Coordinate with your employer, prepare documents, and build a real-time buffer. 5. Watch official consulate updates and the official appointment system, and do not let viral screenshots force irreversible decisions. If you found this helpful, subscribe and turn on notifications, because these consular appointment situations can change quickly, and I will keep updates focused on what we can verify and what you can do next without panic.